director and cinematographer, IBRAHIM NASH'AT. And to his left, Diane Becker, who is an executive producer on the film. So first of all, thank you for coming out. Let's see. I'm just going to talk like this. Why? I'm fine. Everybody move down.
Is it not?
You can all hear me, right?
Can you hear me? I think it's
Okay.
John.
You can't hear me.
Let me see it. I think it's maybe.
You can have this one.
Well, let's see.
Yeah, now it's.
Does it work better when it's on?
Now it works.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for coming out to see this film. Ibrahim, I saw this film almost a year ago at the Telluride Film Festival. It premiered at Venice, then came to Telluride. And I know that there is very little reliable information that comes out of Afghanistan. Is there any way to even update this film with a coda, if you wanted to say what has happened since you left and stopped filming?
As of my code, thank you all first of all for coming and for staying for the. I'm really happy to be here with Diane and to be with you again after our meeting in Telluride, and for my journalistic background, I would rather not say something that I just read in the news. If I don't have anything more to say regarding the story, since I cannot go back to Afghanistan. I'm following the news like anyone else, so there's nothing I could just say that is new from my side.
Well, I'll put out one thing. The 2024 Humanitarian Response Plan for Afghanistan estimates that 23.7 million Afghans need humanitarian assistance now, and that's more than half of the country's population. Ibrahim, I want to ask you first, your background as a filmmaker and why this idea first appealed to you. We'll talk about how you executed it, but your background as a filmmaker and why this story was something that you were interested in pursuing.
You know, I live in the West. I live in Germany, in Berlin. And once you move to the West, you understand that we're all in one pot in the Middle East. So it starts to, we're all dealt with in the same way. So this idea of me being Egyptian has expanded to me being a Middle Eastern, and we're all covered under one pot. And when I saw the images of the people in the airport in that horrific day in 2001 when the US left and everybody was running to the airport, and that scene was really heavy, especially those two who fell from the airplane. They tried to hang themselves to the wheels of the airplane and they fell. And that image didn't make me rest. And I was back then with Talal Dirki, the producer of the film and the co-writer, who did also Fathers and Sons, and he left for 2 years with Al-Nusra in Syria. So he did something similar, and I told him, hey, I would love to go to Afghanistan to show the world in whose hands this country was left.
I think it's fair to say the Taliban are not really believers in free press, or I think journalists are considered enemies. There's an opening shot very quickly of them rolling over film. Under the first Islamic Emirate from 1996 to 2001, the Taliban banned any kind of photography, film, or image displaying human faces. And then this February, under the interim Taliban authority, the Taliban banned filming of meetings with government officials in Kandahar. So that was then, this is now, and yet there you are with your camera. So what was your pitch to them so that even as they're threatening you with death, if you don't do them justice, they wanted at least to welcome you in initially?
When I got into Afghanistan, I was there quite early. I was really, really early. 3rd of September, around 3rd of September I was there. And at that time, they were seeking the approval and the validation of media. They were saying, we're Taliban 2.0, the situation is different. We are no longer the old Taliban. We will let women be free. They will do press conferences, and women journalists sit there and then they treat them nicely. They smile to them. So this was the propaganda they were making for themselves. And definitely we didn't buy into any of that. We understand that this is all a show to show in the beginning, but we know the reality behind that. And I got there at that time. I presented myself, showing my CV that I'm someone that worked with a lot of world leaders for a decade, showing that I come from a background that is from the Middle East, so maybe I could understand the environment. And I said, I want whatever I will see, I will show. And I asked for an access where many people were granted access, but the difference is I asked for a 1-year access. In the beginning it was okay, of course not okay, but compared to what happened later, it felt okay now, thinking about it all. But then by the time it started to get really, really hard as he started to turn into a regime. So you need to get the permission of this leader and this leader and this leader and this leader, and there's one passing in the street that has become leader. You need to get the permission of that person. And it has become like I've become Sisyphus myself, and the axis became my rock. That I need to keep just pushing it, just to get 1 or 2 extra days of shooting.
So when they say something like, we don't like the movie, we'll kill him, are you understanding that? Is that being translated, or is that not, you don't find out till after the fact?
So in the beginning, there was one situation with when the interpreter translated to me, and he told me, hey, he said this, and I freaked out. So at the end of the day, we went to sit together, and I said, hey man, whenever you talk bad about me, never mention that. And the guy took it super serious. Like he took it as an order somehow, that for the rest of the trip he never told me anything. So he was carrying all of this pressure on his shoulder, and I didn't understand that at all until we went to the edit and we started to see the footage, and I started to see not just one, many. This is like just a couple that we should put in the movie. There are many of them that we have, many where they call me with way worse names, especially my mom. They have mentioned her many times, and when Adel, we had to pull him out, the translator of Afghanistan, and now he lives in Berlin for his safety. So when he came and I said, how come you never translated that to me? He said, you told me not to translate it. I was like, the amount of emotional stress that you were going through, keeping that for yourself is huge.
What is your crew? Yourself? Is there a sound person and an interpreter, or not even that?
Me and him and
That's it?
Yeah. I was doing sound and camera.
Wow. Diane, I want to ask you a little bit about coming onto the film. Where is it editorially, and as you're kind of shaping it, what are the thematic ideas if you're trying to figure out what the tone of the film is, what scenes come in, what scenes come out? What was your North Star?
I mean, I think myself and Odessa and Shane, the producers, came in during the edit and at the beginning stages, and I think for us and for the team, and I'll let Ibrahim elaborate on it, but it was a couple of different tracks. There was the propaganda track, there was the weapons,
The finding and repairing
and using them, and then there was the military regime, right? And so those were the story tracks that we had to continually, talk about and sort of explore in the edit. Do you want to elaborate on that?
About how much you were telling me, no, not enough, you have to work more. It's we had to go through a lot of rough cuts, and the brilliant part about this, and really I mean it, that it was very collaborative. Everybody was really participating, and everybody was giving their input, and what this did to the film is it made it understandable in different cultures. So me and Talal, we come from the Middle East. Diana and Odessa and Shane, they come from here. Atanas, our editor, comes from the Balkans. Marion comes from Europe. We come from different backgrounds, and we all agreed on one cut at the end. And of course, we were supported by Sahara Karimi, our executive producer, who joined us extensively in the last phases of edit. And
she's Afghan.
She's head of the Afghan national film that was also shot by the Taliban. And when we all watched the last cut, and we all felt the pain that the Afghans are feeling every single day, from suffering from 42 years of war, never being given a break. They never had the choice to have the Soviet Union invade them, nor that the Americans and the NATO would invade them, nor that they have to live today under the Taliban. Never have been this generation that's living today given the choice to choose anything of what's going on in their country. And when we felt that pain, we knew that this is the movie that we should bring out.
You're shooting for a year. At what point did you become very clear that they had no interest in governing? They were just interested in aggregating power and increasing their military strength?
At the very first second.
Very first second.
That they met me, and I thought, I was like, hey, I'm from this background, and they were not interested at all. And then I said, I also filmed a lot of world leaders, show me pictures. And then I started to show pictures of me with world leaders, and they were like, oh, you film with this, you film with that. Oh, you filmed with Mahathir Mohamad, this guy was filming with Mahathir Mohamad. And then suddenly the whole receiving of me is different, and then I understand, okay, these are people who seek power, and they seek the same validation that happened on that side. So this was very clear from the very first second.
Do you think their ego helped you get the access that you wanted?
Oh yes.
I'm going to ask you about the style of filmmaking. You make a decision about how you're going to tell this story, which is you're going to observe. You're not going to ask questions. You're not going to have experts weighing in. You're just watching them do what they're doing, or as it turns out, what they're not doing in some circumstances. So in a way, you're doing a little bit of cinema verite. I'm also reminded of Frederick Weissman and his documentaries. Was that the approach you chose at the very beginning, or did the circumstances dictate that approach?
It was the Frederick Wiseman is my hero. When I was wanting to become a filmmaker and not continue doing journalism, I wanted to do something to impress him. Somehow in the back of my mind, that's something that this is cinema for me, and that's why I went to do observational film. Later, I realized that not doing interview is something that is protecting me, because the more I ask, the more they understand what's going on into my head. I didn't realize that in the beginning, but by the time I realized that this has saved me a lot, that it kept also the distance between me and them. And Frederick Wiseman himself came to the movie in Venice, and he told me I was very tired, and for my health, he's 93. 94 now,
I think.
94 years old. He said I had to leave because of my health, but I stayed because your movie was very good. And this summed up my whole career. I think it stopped there. Whatever happens before or after, my life stopped in that moment.
I want to ask you about a couple moments. Diane, you can weigh in too. Were there scenes that you say to yourself, this has to be in the film? Chocolates, I guess, would be one.
Chocolates, medications, the treadmill. The treadmill was just,
Right.
it's gold.
And there's also this kind of recurring idea of whether or not they're understanding or misapplying or bastardizing Sharia law. Because I think, as Mukhtar says, I hope that our new law doesn't contradict with Sharia law. Like they're throwing darts. They don't know, but they're going to come to their own conclusion. Was that something you saw very early on, that they were bending their beliefs to their ends rather than having a meaningful theological debate about what was the best thing for the country?
This was for me I went there thinking that the Taliban has the strongest ideology, and I thought I would meet people with a really stiff, hard ideology, but when I met people with very stiff, hard rules and following of the leader. So whatever the leader says, they do. Mukhtar once told me, if our Amir asked me to go and throw myself in the fire, I will do it. And this doesn't have any rule except that this is the regime that's built. And it became crystal clear to me when he said, I hope our new law does not contradict with the Sharia law, because this made me understand with whom I'm dealing.
And then it reveals itself not only in the chocolate speech, but we see women being beaten. We have no idea what for or for anything. And those, I think, are also moments that you say have to be in the film.
The topic of the woman had to be definitely in the film, because I'll tell a funny story. When I was there, because of the amount of testosterone, I had to go to the shop and buy female leggings, and I wore it some days to feel a bit relaxed, because it's too much of manhood around them. This is the style of living that they have, and that's how I was able to cope with them. And for me, I wanted to make a portrayal of the world of the Taliban. How you entered this movie, you entered their life, you entered through the experience of what I left, and that's only what I lived. This is not the truth about the Taliban. This is the truth about what I tried to show of my own journey. The situation is way more complicated than whatever we could show in 50 movies. But in their world that I saw, that women are only allowed to go free in the street if they are beggars. So you don't see women in anywhere except if they are begging. That's the only time they are not being bugged. And unfortunately, even now, in the news it's coming that they say Kabul is beggars free, which means what have you done to these women?
I want to ask about another scene, and that's where the soldiers go on the plane without authorization, which, we could debate why they do that. Are they childish? Are they not sophisticated? But what happens to them afterward, to me, feels more important to you than what they did when they got on the plane, how they're treated by their commanding officer.
So this is something Talal said when he watched the day when I was telling him, even before he watched the film. He said, so he learned that when he slaps faces, he gets to have his hand kissed. So he will just go around and kiss more faces, slap more faces because he wants more kisses on his hand. And that's what happened to in front of me that day. It's the same guys who were beaten. They went in later and kissed his hand. And that's clear establishment of a military regime that you just got to follow. And the guy said to him, "We also have martyrs. We sacrificed for that day." Like the ones he was beating, he was saying, "We sacrificed for that day." But the celebration is only for the big bosses in there.
Diane, I want to ask you a somewhat unusual question. Most filmmakers are very worried about piracy. Are you hopeful this film could be pirated into Afghanistan and be seen by its people? And can you like have some drones drop some DVDs in the country?
I mean, we welcome that, you know. We certainly wanted that to happen in Russia with Navalny, and we absolutely want that to happen with this film.
Did it happen with Navalny? By the way,
The
you
Dark
know
Web.
that Diane's other film includes Navalny, one of her other films.
But yeah, no, the internet is a black hole, and things get out.
What was a scene that you held on to the very end and then you finally lost, that didn't make the final cut? A scene that you really loved but didn't quite work in the film as it was assembled?
I think there was a very, very important scene for us where there's a woman's voice that appeared. And this was very dear to me because I felt something with that. And at a relative woman. And at a certain point, we realized that if we do leave that as part of the movie, we're putting her life in danger. So we just decided to pull that out. And there was definitely a full other character who was just like really crazy to film him. Maybe in the next movies it will come out, but he is like, he would literally say something and go and do the opposite of it and brag about that he's done it. So say we have to visit the graves of our martyrs every Friday, and then he goes and he doesn't know how to get to the graves, and the guys direct him, and he stands in front of the grave and prays for someone else, and the guy's like, "Mauloi, this is not his grave, this is the grave of this guy," and he's like, "Oh, okay," and then he starts to pray for that guy. So for me, this whole character that we didn't make it to the film, I'm really sad, but it wasn't part of the things that Dan mentioned. And I made them suffer a bit until we accepted that, yes, we had to let go of that.
I'm going to reserve time for a couple audience questions. I have a couple more questions. One is, do you have any idea whether or not anybody that you filmed has seen the movie?
The movie is coming now in theaters, so if you come to attend, that doesn't look like we have them here.
I
Not so
hope
much
not.
audience, but maybe they are going to watch it definitely and send their guys to watch the film in cinemas, but they haven't approached me or tried to attack me on social media or anything yet.
I'm going to add this other coda. In September, less than a month after the Taliban regained power in Afghanistan, they banned women and girls from participating in sports. There are 6 Afghan athletes not competing for Afghanistan, but in the Olympics, including 3 women, 2 sisters, Yıldız and Fariba Hashimi, who are cyclists and racers. So if you watch the Olympics, you could see 6 Afghan athletes, even though they're all dissidents and have left the country for their own lives. We have time for a couple questions. Go ahead, if you could stand, if that's okay, so we could hear you.
During the scene where you all came back to that medical warehouse, and obviously what he had said about turning the lights back on and checking if getting the medicine to the hospital before it expired, I was surprised that they didn't just ask you to delete that footage, because it was obviously it didn't look good on them, and he was clearly very aware you were still filming. Did they ever ask you to delete it, or any scenes that you shot that were not good for them?
I think this scene, because it was really stuck in my head, in our heads for so long, and it's something about totalitarian regimes that when something goes bad, they try to act like it never happened. So inside their hearts, they were hoping that this never happened to me as well, and that the doctor head is lazy, and that's it, we end there. And I waited for 3 days, hoping that they will talk about the topic or bring the lazy doctor and then blame him or something, that he's filling up the mistake he made. Like, he knows I filmed that, so he should somehow try to fill that, which he never did. Nothing.
Do you think they let their guard down a little bit, 3, 6, 8 months in, that they got used to you being around, Diane's gonna say yes.
You should tell the story about the day you left and when.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, no, they didn't let the card. That's the opposite. By the time they started to become a regime and things, as I was saying earlier, it was becoming very harder, but I don't want to make this about me, you know?
I understand.
But in the last, I would just talk about the last story, the last day of shooting, the day of the parade. In the morning, the Secret Service came to me and they said, tomorrow you come to our office with all of your footage. And that for me was the line where I know that's the end of my time here. And that's the day when I did film some extra, so I filmed the fight, I filmed him slapping. All of that happened in that day because I didn't really care much. I was running on adrenaline that whole day. And then the moment the parade ended, I went back with them in the car. We arrived, I got out of the car directly to the airport and I flew.
You were able to leave the country.
I was able to leave the country in the same day because I wasn't clocked yet, officially, by them not to stop me.
Other questions? I'm gonna go way back and we'll get 2 more. Go ahead.
How did you get access to that level of the Taliban? Did you have to, through the year, did you have to gain their trust by spending like social time with them, or just, you know, like personally, how did you maneuver your way to continue that relationship with them? Did you have a fixer or someone in your family or that was familiar?